even if something does come easy, you still need the character to stay with it. And so, but if it doesn't come easy, you definitely need those character traits to kick in to help you persevere through that.
Welcome to the Boom Clap podcast, where culture and conviction collide. I'm your host, Rita Rogers. Today, I have with me Joley Smith, and we're going to have a great conversation for you that I hope is just a really encouraging one. She is a veteran homeschool mom, and when I say that, I mean true veteran. She has children ranging from 31 to 14, so she's in the grandparent stage and also still really in it with homeschool. And she's a real encourager. I heard her speak at a friend's house this September, and it was a conversation that just filled me up. It filled my cup. I came away feeling, you know how if you homeschool or just being a mom in general, you feel a little down sometimes about your role in your job and how you're doing. And I came away feeling really encouraged. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear Joley today. Before we get into it, just remember to subscribe wherever you listen. Support our advertisers because that helps support the podcast, and leave a review wherever you listen. All right, Joley, let's get into it. I'm really, really excited to have you on. I am friends with your oldest daughter, CASA.
Yes.
She is a wonderful woman, and I'm so thankful to have met her and some of the girls that she's friends with, her sister-in-law, Meg. And they have been such a joy to get to know over the last several years. And I'm so thankful for their friendship. And I was thankful when CASA introduced you to me.
Yes, and I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you for having me. And I feel like my kids are my best story. So I really wish you would have them on. I think you'd get a better idea of who I am if you interviewed them. But you have me today. So
yeah,
we'll just go with that.
You guys are really... okay, so we're going to talk about motherhood in general also. So if you guys are listening, you're like, I don't homeschool. All of these homeschool conversations that we've had over the years, I feel like are really helpful for motherhood in general. They're not just about homeschooling, right? We can encourage the homeschool portion of our listenership, but also just motherhood in general, because homeschooling really is about motherhood and rearing your children. But you guys are really involved in the homeschool world. Your husband, Kirk, is the head of Illinois Christian Home Educators. Yes. And so you guys are really involved in what's going on and everything. But so I guess in your house, are you the primary, does Kirk help, or are you the primary teacher? Have you been?
So over the years, it's been a little different each year. He pastored for 25 years. And so when we first started homeschooling and having children, he was starting the church and was gone a lot, very, very busy getting that going and just with people. And so I probably obviously did the majority of that. And I do have an elementary education degree, which I will say a lot of times I feel like that was a hindrance and not a help.
Really?
But my point with that is, like, small children were kind of my thing. And so he came in more as they began to get older. He has always done the devotions in our home. So it's been a combination of both. Where, some history, he loves history. So I did it when they were small. He would come in as they began to get older. I know one year, he felt like, so I had 4 girls first. I guess I should say that. I had 4 girls first and then 5 boys all together, that really rocked my world. I only have a sister, so I didn't really understand the world of boys, and it's been so fun raising them. And then I had 2 little girls after the boys. And so the girls, we struggled with math a little bit. We just, we didn't have that math mind. And I know one year we were getting started, and we always talked about, like, the curriculum I was thinking about using, and I would kind of run things past him. And he said, I think I'll try math this year and see how we do. We're falling a little behind. He felt like we were. And so that lasted just a few days. And he says it all the time. He had him in tears every single day. And it was like, okay, mom better take math back over. So it's been a combination of learning and growing. And, he would take him to work with him sometimes. And so I feel like I had the majority of it, and I usually picked out like the curriculum and kind of set the tempo for what we were going to do each year. But he has definitely, as time has allowed, participated.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if I said this in the intro or not, but you have 11 children.
Yes.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot. Yes.
And you're spread through multiple phases. I think as we were setting up this record date and everything, you were in a different state with some of your children, visiting them. You had just been in Florida for a wedding of one of your children. You have birthdays with kids at home, I think, this week. So you're in multiple phases. And maybe this would be, I don't know, I kind of thought about leaving this till the end, but this is a conversation we've had a lot, towards the end of the year last year on the podcast was, where is the village? And kind of feeling isolated in motherhood. And like, we don't have a lot of support, our generation. And I see this conversation a lot online from millennial mothers. And there was some pushback on that conversation. And then there was some receptiveness. Like some people are like, I totally feel this. And then we have some listeners who are in the grandparent stage are like, you just want somebody else to raise your children. I'm like, no, it's not just about having people here. A lot of us do live far from our families. Okay.
Yes.
And so you know what it's like having kids spread far and wide. But also there's not a lot of, verbal support or like wisdom imparted from the generation before us. It's kind of like, we're done and we're moving on and you've got this. And so I guess what advice would you have for those of us in it to seek out a village, but also on the other side, you're still there for your children who are older. Like, how are you doing that and balancing that?
Well, it is so unique to have such a wide range of children. And I remember telling my husband back when I had very many small ones, and I wasn't as involved in the church as he would like me to be. I mean, I was always there, I attended and everything, but I remember telling him, and I envisioned it, but I didn't know for sure if it would be this way because I didn't see people ahead of me homeschooling and having a large family, but I could see the potential. And I said, just give me a few years and we will have an army. And I have now seen that come to pass. And so, when my kids got a little bit bigger, as far as the church goes, he had so many helpers. If he needed someone to help run the sound system one week, one of the kids could pitch in. If we needed someone in the nursery, one of the kids could pitch in. And it's kind of the same way in the family now too, because I obviously can't be everywhere at one time. But like after Kashaya had her last baby, we used it as homeschool time, and we went up and we took food up to her. And my two youngest daughters, who are 16 and 14, they helped with Josie, which they absolutely love doing. And they would, we helped clean. We, tried to help her get her laundry caught up so that she could still rest and recover and recoup. And we did that for quite a long time. And she has said that was just such a huge help. Now, I could have gone by myself. She lives close enough. I could have, but having the two extra helpers, we were able to do so much more for her. And so it's kind of the same. My kids in Florida, I do contact them often, and we're in, touch frequently, and we try really hard to see each other often. We found that Spirit Airlines is really cheap and can get us there pretty quickly. They don't have layovers. And so I do try really hard to see them, either go down and see them or them come up here and see us. But they have siblings that live in Florida now. And so just yesterday, they sent pictures and 2 of them were having breakfast together and they went hiking after breakfast together. And then, so I know they have each other if I can't be there. And I think that's the hardest thing as a mom maybe to get used to is delegating out and not feeling like you have to do everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, I want to participate in everything with with my grandchildren, but in practicality, I can't. And so just knowing that they have each other, and my oldest daughter is very nutritionally minded. And so if there's a question that comes up, they still will ask me oftentimes, but anymore, it usually goes straight to her. And then one of my daughters is a nurse. And so if there's a question about that, I mean, they will ask me because I have had 11 kids. So oftentimes I've seen whatever it is, the problem is, but they'll go to my daughter who's a nurse and ask her that question. And so they not only have me, but they have each other. And I think that helps with the village situation when I'm far away. Now, if they didn't have family, I would, it's hard nowadays when you don't know people well. I would say seek someone out, but you never know what their worldview is. You never know how they feel about issues that are close to your heart. But I do believe that God, if you are seeking God and praying, He will bring people across your path that will fill those voids that you find yourself having in certain seasons in life.
Oh, absolutely. I feel that for sure with your daughter and Meg. I mean, I was praying for years. I don't live super far from my family, but I live about 4 hours, And so when I moved here, it's a really small town. And so it was my husband's high school friends, like their girlfriends or wives were my friends, and they still are. But I was, you don't have the people that are like you as much, necessarily with your worldview and things. And so I had been praying for that for years. And God did send May friends, and that's been wonderful. So I'm so thankful for that. But what I'm hearing you say is you've developed your little mini army in your family that can help each other. And so you're not bearing that, I don't want to say burden, that's not the word, but you're not bearing that responsibility all on your shoulders. Correct. And so that leads me to my next question, which is one that I have often. How are you raising kids that love each other really well? Because I see a lot of sibling rivalry, and that's one thing I really want for my kids as they grow up is to have each other and to not, to be able to love each other really well and support each other and want the best for each other, and see each other's strengths as something that can be helpful to them, not something that's like a competition.
Yes. I would say that's such a big question. But so my son just got married a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't know a lot of the people. It was in Florida, and I cannot tell you the number of people that came up to me and said, "Your family loves each other." And I guess to us, I don't notice it shining forth like it does. And I told my kids, you did that. You shine the love of Christ wherever you are by loving each other and loving others. But the girls helped with all of the hair that day. My sons had made a video for their oldest brother who got married, just showing him throughout the years with them and how they were going to miss him, but they were so happy that the Lord had given him such a wonderful wife. And it was so touching. They spent a ton of time on it. And just seeing them, I mean, I guess I see them often and I know they're close, but I think it's such a shock to the world oftentimes because kids are here and there and they're not spending time together. And it's not that they dislike each other. It's almost like they don't really know each other. And so I would say that is one thing that, we did pretty much everything together. Even if it was, and this is something I was going to mention later, but even if it was something that one of them wasn't particularly interested in, it was so good for them. Number one, they just learned a new interest or a new skill or some new information. Sometimes it opened up something they were interested in and they didn't know it. But more than that, it gave them an opportunity to invest in that other sibling. And one example of that is Kashaya, my oldest. She has always been an outdoor girl. She loves to hunt. She loves being down at the barn. She always, if we couldn't find her growing up, she was at the barn. And when we first got goats, I'm from a small town, but still, I wasn't raised in the country. So it was all very unfamiliar to me. And so we came home with this goat, and we didn't know how to milk it. I mean, they showed us before we left with it, but I can't say that any of us had a real handle on the situation. And so, each of us and you can't let a goat go without milking her. And so we were all trying so desperately to milk this poor goat. And my other daughter, my second daughter, who is the complete opposite of Kashaya, she is so girly and just the essence of femininity and just so sweet and quiet. And she doesn't really care if she's outside or not. But for some reason, I don't know if it's because she had a gentle touch, but she was the one who could milk that goat. And so for like 2 weeks, we had to have her go down and milk the goat for us. And she never complained. She would try to show us what she was doing. And I can't say that she loved it, but she learned a lot from it. And after about 2 weeks, we all kind of got the hang of it and she could stop doing it. But it was such a great example of her investing in her sister and learning a new skill and just kind of being a part of something she would have never been a part of otherwise. And so I think that helps them bond, when they see, we would go watch Gracie do ballet, my feminine, she loved ballet. We would go watch her do ballet. Well, the others weren't so interested in ballet, but they were investing in their sister. And I think that just all along the years has helped bring them closer together and, bond them. And I will say I don't want to make it sound like it was perfect. They squabbled when they were little, and they could probably tell you more about that than I can remember. But I listened to Elizabeth Elliot's daughter speak one time, and it was a great talk. But one thing she said was she would make her children, instead of separating them when they squabbled, I think she actually had a T-shirt that had it was a big T-shirt. She would put them in that T-shirt and make them stay close together. Well, I never did that, but I would make them hold hands and stay close together, or they would have to do a chore together to kind of get over that squabble and learn to work together. So it wasn't always like roses and always happy all the time. But when they did squabble, that was one thing I found that really helped. Instead of giving them that chance to get away from each other, they had to learn to resolve that together. So
that's good advice. I'm guilty of separating them often but you know what? That's a good example of, that's the easier thing probably to do in the moment for me, is to separate them. Yes. But what they need is to learn to work through it. And so giving them a task to work through together is probably the harder thing for myself, but the better thing for them in the long run that ultimately fixes the problem.
Yes. And I feel like, again, it was more challenging, but that was I will never forget that. And I tell my kids that now as well. Like, that was such a good little nugget of wisdom that I gained from that talk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you talked about ballet, one of your kids being in a ballet, and then you had a goat, and I know you had other livestock and things. So busyness is a big thing, I feel, for our generation. We're just busy and into everything. And I struggle with this because I want just time at home with my family. And I feel like I'm doing better than I did when I was a kid. I was in everything. I was busy. And to no fault of my parents, it's just how things were and what we did. And so we didn't really have a lot of time together at home. And I do think that leads to us not, quote, knowing each other as well, for sure. But I want more time at home with my family, even than we have now. And I don't even feel like we're the busiest comparatively to other families around us, but it still feels too busy. So how do you decide what is something that's going to be ultimately helpful for your kids? And how do you get over that feeling of setting stuff down and then missing out? How did you work through that or still work through that?
Well, I wouldn't say we did this perfectly, for sure. The world pulls us, and not bad things, good things pull us. And so we kind of set a few ground rules. They really didn't participate in a lot of things until they got old enough to realize it was really what they wanted to do, unless it was something we could all do together. Like I remember my little girls, when I just had the 4 little girls, we did a mom and me little gymnastics class together, but they could all 4 do it together. I would go with, we were all together other than Daddy. He would come watch us when they had their little, program or whatever. But other than that, we did 4-H when they got a little bit older. But again, we were doing that as a family together. But and this is probably controversial for people who are really into doing a lot of the extracurricular things, but we didn't give them much opportunity to do that until they got old enough to know they really wanted to do it. And so for my daughter who did ballet, most people start when they're little, 2 and 3 years old. And when she didn't start till I think she was 13 or 14, and they were already in point shoes and she was not even there yet. But I felt like because she was old enough to decide that she really wanted it, she worked hard to not only catch up, but then excel in it as well. And so all of my kids, they were a little older before they often did the things that they have found that they love to do. They did have music lessons, but they would all go together as well for that. And then my older ones started teaching my younger ones, so we quit having to go to music lessons eventually. And also I would try, like Kashaya and one of my Ellie had horse lessons, and Gracie and Kana did ballet. But I had told them that I would look for someone to give horse lessons and give ballet lessons. But if we couldn't do it on the same day and close to the same area, that was my way of knowing that's not what God had for us at this time. And so I, hunted around and found someone that would do them both on the same day. And so it was just an afternoon away once they were older and they could do each what they enjoyed doing. And then we were home the rest of the time, because I also have struggled being, that tendency to be pulled and torn from one thing to the other. And I remember hearing a little boy at our church one day. He was so young, and I think he was going to, I don't know what, some sort of sports practice after church. And he said, "Mommy, I just want to go home." And that, I never forgot that. And some kids are more social and maybe don't long to be home as much, but I do feel like home is such a safe place for kids that I want to make sure they were there as much as they could be. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And I actually wonder, it got me thinking, because sometimes I wonder what my kids' interests would be if they weren't in some things younger. Like my daughters did do ballet when they were younger. They don't anymore. But there was just 2 of them and I took them at the same time. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. It was fun and cute. But I wonder if waiting until kids are older and they know what they're interested in helps them to develop and discern their true interests. Because I think sometimes when they do start so young, it might plant a seed of what they think they're interested in, but isn't something they actually are. Do you know what I mean? Yes. And then they have all these broad interests. Yes. And they never hone that one thing that God made them to do.
Right. I agree with that. And I will say also a little bit on the flip side of that, my tendency and my husband's tendency is when you get into something, like you're in it forever. And so that was to make sure it was something they really liked. But I feel like, if they tried it and didn't like it, they were almost afraid to tell us. And so we got, and because we didn't want them to just quit, because it was like my daughter who played violin, we had read all of the Little House on the Prairie series. And so she wanted to play the fiddle like Pa. And she thought, as soon as she picked up that violin, that old Susanna was just going to, magically start playing. And she was so shocked that it really didn't sound very good for quite a long time. And we didn't want to give her the freedom to just quit. Oh, this doesn't sound good. Oh, this is a little harder than I thought it was going to be. I don't want to do it. And so we tried to just each year we would reevaluate. So they knew they were in it for the year, and then we could reevaluate. And if they had really good reasons for wanting to continue or for wanting to quit, we would all talk about that. And we didn't, we ultimately made the decision, but they had input in that. Mm-hmm. And so it really helped them to hone in on what their interests were and to say, yes, this is something I'm good at. This is something I love. I do want to keep doing this. Or, I thought this was going to be different than it is. I've really given it a good try, and I just don't feel like my time is well used doing this. So I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, it does. It does. That's good. If you're on the hunt for the best non-toxic products to use in your home and on your family, look no further than ROWE CASA Organics. They have products for your household, for body care, sleep, teas, hormone products, wellness products, allergies, skincare, you name it. It's a one-stop shop that is non-toxic and you can trust. You can use the code BOOMCLAP to save 20% on your first order. ROWE CASA is on a mission to provide clean, non-toxic, high-quality, and completely natural, effective products. They're constantly pursuing the best ingredients found in nature, along with working alongside organic chemists and third-party testers to ensure maximum potency, efficacy, and quality with every ingredient in every product. If you haven't tried ROWE CASA yet, go to ROWECASAorganics.com and use the code BOOMCLAP to save 20% on your first order. Okay, so one thing you said when you did your little talk at our friend's house there, you said this, and I was like, oh, this is really good. And I know this deep down, but it's something I don't think about. You said you might teach your kids once, but you train them over the years. And often I say something and I just expect it to stick. And I'm so dense because I know things that I'm supposed to do, and I need to be told over and over. I need God to refine me over and over, yes. Right? And so I don't know why that's so hard for me to understand with my kids, but can you talk to the role of homeschooling as discipleship, or just parenting in general, discipling your kids?
Yes. Well, I'm kind of the same with you. I just thought we tell them. And my husband really did, especially when he started teaching math, he was like, I'm going to tell them and we can move on to the next lesson. And it just, no matter what the situation is, whether it is an educational situation or a spiritual situation or just growing in character or maturity, I feel like you may only have to tell them once, and some kids will get it quicker, no matter what it is. Some kids may get it quicker, but others, either because they don't want to or because it's just hard for them to remember, could be, I think you have to handle that differently. If a child is definitely showing signs of, I wouldn't say rebellion, but just like, I don't want to do this, that is handled differently than a child who really is trying, but it's just having a hard time sticking. And so I feel like those are two different situations. I do know with my kids, it has helped so much over the years. And as a mom, it's so hard to do this. But if I participated with them, it made it so much easier for them to want to do it and to keep doing it. So rather than me saying, you need to go wash the dishes, or you need to mop the floor, or, whatever, memorize scripture or memorize this poem. If I could participate in that with them, it made it so much easier for them to keep wanting to do it. And that was so hard for me, especially in the early years when you have so many little ones. But I did always try to consciously do that. It didn't always, I wasn't always able to, but it was always on my mind to try to. And I think that also makes a big difference on how well it sticks with the kids. So it's just a process for sure.
Yeah. And then something else you talked about was just that character comes first. Character development needs to come before math or the subjects, right? And that math teaches character. I was like, oh, that's a really good point.
Yes. Yeah. And I did not learn that in the proper order. I was a teacher first. So I just naturally, that when we first started teaching, I set my kids down and let's open the book and we'll get started. And I began to realize that they need to learn to sit and be quiet while mommy's talking, or that, there were so many character things that we needed to establish first before we got started on the math or the grammar or the reading. And that transfers not just when they're little, but my daughter, who is a nurse, she is the most happy-go-lucky, social, hospitable. She has so many great qualities, but she did not like school. She did not like to sit down and do her schoolwork. Whereas some of my others weren't as social, and they would, give them a book and a corner and they were happy all day long. So it's just different personalities, but she has so many great qualities, but school didn't come naturally. She was smart, but it didn't come naturally for her. But from a young age, she had read about Florence Nightingale and Molly Pitcher, and she wanted so badly to be a nurse. At like 5 and 6 years old, she wanted to be a missionary nurse. She wanted to go on the missionary field. And, as she got a little bit older, we started saying, now that's going to require a lot of perseverance in your educational choices. And we just kept telling her that she would read the exciting stories of the missionaries, and it was kind of like my daughter thinking she could play the violin right away. Like you don't just go from wanting to do it to doing it. There's a whole process of training and, all the education it takes. And so, we just kept telling her that over the years. And to be honest, I thought by the time it was time for her to make some decisions, like once we finished homeschooling, I really didn't think she would pursue that just because it is so much work. But her character had kept pace with her maturity. And so when it came time to decide, she said, no, I really want to do this. And we said, you will have very little social life. You will have very little time with your family doing fun things. And she weighed all of that. And she did so well through her nursing school, but we hardly ever saw her. She literally studied from morning to night and would sleep a little and get up and do it all over again. But because her character had grown all along the way, she was able to do something that was hard and do it well. And so I think getting that character first, even if something does come easy, you still need the character to stay with it. And so, but if it doesn't come easy, you definitely need those character traits to kick in to help you persevere through that.
Yeah. Well, I think because I started homeschooling late, this is only my 4th year homeschooling, but for me, it's it's been easier to not prioritize the subjects as much as the character, just because I think that working out in the workforce as a nurse, you know, I I would think about what was praised at work. You know, why did I get good reviews at work all the time? It was never because I did a great job, you know, balancing my input and output and doing the math. It wasn't it was never the subjects. It was always the critical thinking, the ability to actually show up for work, you know, and not call in all the time. And those kind of things that, you know, be there for my coworkers when they need help, you know, not be lazy. Those were the things that you're praised for. And so when I think about what's needed in the workforce, even, you know, character, yes, because we want to, you know, live our purpose and, you know, be Christian women or men, you know, in the world, character for that sake. But also what's needed in the workforce is character qualities, right? It's not, you know, the subjects, yes, are important, but unless you're like going to some field where you need to be an Einstein, you know, it's a pretty level playing field. I feel like character that's separating you from the flock.
Yes, I agree. And I see that I only have 2 left in my homeschooling. All the rest are now in college and beyond. And they all excelled, not because they were so smart, although I want to say they are smart, but some struggled way more with schooling than others. Even though they are smart, they struggled. But I feel like they've excelled because of that very reason. They have great people skills. And my daughter, who is a nurse, she was the same as you. Like she got good marks and things because she was good with the patients. She was always faithful. It was those things that caused her to excel. And so I 100% agree with that. And my daughter, when I was asking them some things to mention, my 4th daughter, who is an entrepreneur at heart, she started selling puppies at 12. She's just always been a wheeler dealer and but math was a real struggle for her. But when it came to making sure she got the right amount of money from each puppy, math became way more important to her. And I feel like life skills help some of these educational things really, blossom, and it explains why we need to know certain things. But she said, Mom, please be sure to tell them that we get paid for our strengths. We get paid for the things that we're good at. I was not great at math, but she ran some social media platforms for different pickleball. She was in the professional pickleball world for a while. And she ran some social media platforms. And she said, you know what? They never asked me how well I did in math. They just wanted to know that I was good at the skill they were hiring me for. And I mean, that's not to say, okay, if they're not good at math, just don't make them do it. I'm not saying that at all. We definitely still need to be able to count and add and subtract and all of those things. But they will flourish in the areas of their strengths. And so I always wanted to really try to let them know how proud I was of those strengths that they had, even if they were different. And I feel like this is one area that we can shine in homeschooling, because as a teacher in the public school system, it is so hard to have 30 kids and try to find each of their individual interests and what they're good at. But as moms, we're with our kids all day, every day. That's what, we become a student of our children, and we know what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And I feel like we can really encourage them in those strengths. So anyhow, that's just another thought that one of my kids mentioned.
Well, you hear about and read about, all of the great artists and musicians and things of the past, and you hear about a lot of them that their mother or someone in their life set aside everything else and just let them play to their strength. And I feel like that's so hard. One, the world is so noisy, like we talked about earlier, just busyness all around us. And so you have to let your kid narrow that thing down that they love. But then also you have to mentally be able to say, these other things aren't as important, and I'm going to, let my kid hone this one thing that they're really good at.
Yes.
I feel like that's hard.
It is hard. And it wasn't quite as hard for me with my daughters initially, because although they all wanted to pursue an education, their highest hopes were to be a wife and a mother, which then they would eventually homeschool, hopefully, my grandchildren. So I wanted them to have a good education. Mm-hmm. But I did not feel as restricted by the typical educational system. Yeah. But then when my sons came along, and I felt like I really needed to make sure that they could jump through the hoops, which I hate. I hate that they have to, but, if they wanted to get a college degree or, mm-hmm. whatever it was they needed. And so I did feel a sense of, like, it was hard sometimes to let them play to their strengths, because I felt like, we've just got to still be sure to get all of these things in. But I found that you can, like, Kashaya loves horses. She has always loved animals. Her one whole year for science, she did equine. It was an equine course for horses. But that transfers. It was anatomy, which, not all animals are the same, but she was like, that gave her so many skills for other areas of science. And I feel like, and I realized, okay, we can play to their strengths, and that honestly will help them in some of the other things that they just have to do, mm-hmm. To jump through the hoops. And so I felt a little less stress about that when I saw that play out and actually work to her favor, and then, to some of the other kids as well. I just lived in so much fear when my kids were little, and like afraid I wasn't going to do a good enough job, and afraid they wouldn't make it into college. And I think I said this at Megan's. There's two different ways I've seen two different quotes, but one says, God gives us the grace for the present. And so when we are worried or scared about or fearful about something in the future, it's because God's grace hasn't been applied to that yet. And another way, C.S. Lewis, I think, said, worry is just looking at the future without God's grace. So it's basically the same thing, but that's what I did. I was looking to the future and forgetting that God's grace covers so much. And so I looking back now, all of that fear that I had, my kids have done great. And it's not because God has been faithful every step of the way. And they have all found their areas of interest. They've found areas to fit into society. They all contribute in their churches. And, they have done all the things I was so afraid they wouldn't do, and so mm-hmm. homeschooling does work. Home discipleship, it does. God just covers up a lot of the mistakes that maybe we make along the way, and just allows our kids to flourish in the midst of that. So yeah, I love that. And that is hard to remember. God's grace is for the present. Yeah. Yes. One of my daughters loved reading about the martyrs, especially like female martyrs. She has a very strong personality, and she wants to tackle the world. And she just loved reading about the martyrs. And she would say, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could do that. And after reading those quotes, I would say, you are thinking of it in terms of how you feel right now, if that were to happen to you. But when you're in that situation, if God places you in those situations, He will give you the grace and the strength to overcome and to push through. And it's the same with our homeschooling. It's the same with anything that we feel could be a struggle or a stumbling block in our future. We've got to remember to apply His grace to that situation. And that's where the victory comes.
LLAMA Naturals is our family's favorite multivitamin for our kids. And you can save 20% at llamanaturals.com with code Rita. Getting kids, even the ones that are great eaters, to eat enough fruits and veggies can be a challenge. LLAMA Naturals makes this easy with 13 essential nutrients sourced from real fruits and veggies so you can fill in the gaps without the struggle. There are 3 big reasons that I chose this vitamin and I like it for my kids. 1, it's made with organic fruits and veggies. It's food-based, not a synthetic vitamin. The second reason, there's no added sugar and additionally no added sweeteners. There's nothing artificial. And this is really hard to find. A lot of multivitamins tout that there's no added sugar, but you find on the back there's stevia or monk fruit. The other reason I like this vitamin is my kids like it. They think it tastes great. And it's just chewy goodness, but minus that gummy candy texture that sticks to their teeth. These are all great things. They're also third-party tested for metals, microbes, and potency by independent labs so you can know that it's clean, safe, and effective. And really safe and effective, not in the 2020 way, not the 2020 version of safe and effective. It's also allergen friendly. And in addition to their great multivitamin for kids, they have pre and probiotics, elderberry immunity gummies, and adult products as well. So you can go to llamaNaturals.com and use the code Rita to save 20% on your order. Okay, so talking about homeschool as applied to children, we cover, our children and their view in homeschooling a lot and how we're going to teach them. But what has homeschooling done for you? I feel like homeschooling is somewhat of a gift to me as well. So
yes.
What do you have to add there?
I remember we were doing a sermon series in our church, and I can't remember exactly what all the series was, but one of them one week was on sanctification, and I came home from church and I told my husband, and I said, I get it. Homeschooling is not about the education of the child. I mean, that is a part of it, obviously, but I think the bigger part of that is the sanctification of the family, and especially the sanctification of the parent or the mom in particular, because we're with them so much of the day. But it has grown me and pushed me and shown me the ugliness in my heart, my selfishness. And I've thought so many times, if God... Well, he chastens those he loves. And so we should not take that as a negative. But he could have chosen, or if I had made different choices, to use, my career or whatever to do those things. But he chose to use my family who loves me and whom I love to teach me those things and show me those things. And what better place than to learn those within a family context with people that you love, who will readily show forgiveness, who will readily ask for forgiveness. And I 100% believe that it's been more for my sake than for my kids' sake, for sure. And, I hope they will get that experience as well as they go into adulthood, because it has... I used to hear of women, and I really struggled in my early years of being a mom. I would hear these women say, I got up at 5 a.m. and I would have my devotion for an hour, and I would pray for an hour, and I would journal for an hour. And I'm just over there like in my pajamas, just hoping I get an hour of sleep, And I really started feeling very bad about myself spiritually, like that I was just stuck in a rut and I wasn't growing. Well, to be honest, those were the things. I mean, yes, we need to read our Bible. We need to pray 100%. I believe that. I don't think you have to do it an hour a day, but the actual living of life grew me so much in the area of sanctification and forgiveness and grace. And so I just had to look at it a little differently. There may be a time in my life where I will be able to sit down for hours and pray and read, and that may be how God uses to teach me in those seasons. But I was neglecting to see how he was using my moments with my children every day to make me a better Christian, make me more dependent on him. So 100%, I feel like it's been so good for my faith.
Yeah. Well, just yesterday morning, it took me, I think, 2+ hours to get through my Bible reading, and it wasn't a long reading.
Yes.
It was just because I kept getting interrupted, and
Yes.
like the toddler needed me. And that is an exercise in patience. And like, if I'm getting impatient while I'm reading my Bible, I'm kind of missing the point, right? And so that in and of itself is sanctifying, to have your children and to be living life and also in God's word, but I'm so thankful. So we talked about this several times in the past, but not recently. I'm so thankful COVID happened, simply because I probably wouldn't be homeschooling full time with my kids.
Mhm.
I had thought about homeschooling before I lost my job, but from the perspective of my kids were going to private Christian, like Montessori type school.
Mhm.
And I had told my husband, you know what? I think I'm going to ask the teacher if I can just send them the, 1 or 2 days a week that I work, and then homeschool them 3 days a week. And he's like, can you do that? I'm like, well, they're my kids. I can do what I want, I think.
Yeah.
And so that was what I was thinking about. But after I lost my job, it completely opened the door. And I'm so thankful, because it has really, like you said, changed me as a person. And I'm far from perfect. I have so much further to go. I will never get there. But I'm just different as a person, and it's changed our family a lot. And like you said, that's really what it's about, is the change it makes for your family.
Yes, I agree. And it's good for not just the parents, but for the children, and for just the whole family dynamic in general. And I find, we've had, over the years of homeschooling for so long, we've had the moments of people saying, they aren't socialized, or, is their education going to be a solid we've heard all of the conversations, but I will say that I have seen now, raising multiple children with different personalities, that having them home with me, people said, well, they're going to be scared to go out into the world. They're just going to be so sheltered, and they're just going to want to be with you all the time. My kids have been so much more secure, I think, in learning at home, that it makes them feel confident to go out. Whereas we often push them to go out thinking they need to learn that. But instead, I think if they have that time at home with us, they will eventually feel more confident to go out. And I've heard also in a similar regard, like, oh, your empty nest season is going to be so tough because you had them with you all the time and you're going to be so lonely. And I've seen so many moms already that have gone through that season. And I think because they did have so many more moments than a lot of moms get, there is adjustment for sure. I don't want to say there isn't, but you got the best of them, and you got to spend so much time with them, that it's honestly so rewarding to see them go out. And I don't see near as many moms have that empty nest struggle, because they were able to spend so much time with their children. So a lot of times it's just the exact opposite of what the world tells you, or what you would think would happen. It's the exact opposite. God's word is so faithful in those regards, that a lot of times what the culture seems to be how it should be, God's word is often just the exact opposite of that. So
yeah. I hadn't really thought about that, but it's true. If you're getting the best moments and making the most of every moment, you're not going to have the regret of the missed time, right?
Yes.
Because, I can see that being the opposite of what you would think.
Yes. And
because I have thought that personally. I'm like, oh, my kids are with me all the time. When they leave, it's going to be a shock.
Yes.
But I'm not going to think, oh, what if I had homeschooled, because that's something on my heart.
Yes.
And if I hadn't taken that step,
Yes. Or the hours that you didn't get with them, and that you just think, oh, there's so many hours I would have loved to have had with them. And now they're gone. And they come and they go very quickly. But I do feel like having them with me, and I did not make the most of every minute with my kids. I do live in that regret sometimes, because in the hustle and bustle and the busyness of, changing diapers and, getting little sleep, I can't say that I always made the most of each moment, but I had so many more moments than a lot of moms get. That I don't think, I mean, I know I don't live in that kind of regret, like wishing I had more time with them, because I did get so much time with them. And I'm just grateful. I'm so grateful for the time that I got, that it doesn't make me sad now that they're gone.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's one thing I'm struggling with a little bit, in the diaper changing and like busyness, potty training, all of that phase. My older girls, like we're kind of in 2 stages of life, and you've lived that obviously, but it's a little hard living in 2 stages, having, and you're probably like in 3 stages now, I guess. But, we have the older ones that are just running around, doing their things, and I'm taking them places. And so we have the toddler. And when my girls were little, they were at home and I could just do what they needed to do. But now the toddler gets drug along with us, and kind of like everybody's suffering a little bit.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I do struggle with that a little, because I don't think I have as much time to just devote individually to my girls like I used to. But we're figuring that out, I suppose.
Yes. And I think we forget, again, it's what I said in the very beginning. We do not have to be responsible for every minute of their day. Them changing a diaper for you is helpful to you, but also helpful for them. They're learning. And so I never wanted, it was Kirk and I's decision to have God gave us our children, but, we had the large family. I never wanted any of my kids to feel like they were having to raise their siblings. I never wanted them to feel that way. But I did want them to understand what it was like to have children, because they will have children one day. And, some women get into adulthood and they've never changed a diaper, or they've never rocked a baby, or, and it's such a shock to them that they feel very inadequate and insecure. And so I wanted my kids to be able to know how to do all of those things and feel like they could do them, but without feeling like they were the ones that were having to do it. Yeah. But it is good for them to learn those things. And it does help to kind of take some of that pressure off of you, to feel like you have to do everything.
Yeah. Okay. I have 2 more questions for you. The first one, how do you feel like you rest or rejuvenate yourself with all the busyness of motherhood and homeschooling and everything?
That's a tricky one. I feel like I have told my girls who are now mothers to really try to rest. When we first started homeschooling and having children, it was kind of this thing of, being superhuman, super moms. You do it all. You can never sleep and still be busy all day. And then I think that kind of made its way into so much focus on self-care, kind of more in this era. And I don't really like all of this self-care buzz as far as, the spa days. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean but that's not exactly the self-care. I'm talking about finding some form of exercise that you can do every day. It doesn't have to be, or not every day, but that you can consistently do. If you can't go to the gym with 6 kids, then don't start. Like, I walked a lot, and I still like to walk, because that was something I could do with my kids and still give me a little bit of exercise. Because I think if you start and stop, and you're trying to do this like hour-long workout program, that's just not sustainable for motherhood generally. And so one of the things I've told my kids is to find something simple that you can do on a very consistent basis. And then also with rest, to not feel guilty about resting, to not say, I need rest, because we cannot give all that we need to give to our kids if we are not rested. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I struggled with that, not because anybody particularly, but I just felt guilty. I felt guilty if I rested. But we need to have that time of rest in order to be able to give to those that the Lord has entrusted to us. And as they get older, it's harder. I do know when I had kids that were in like the college age still at home, two that were going to cosmetology school. And then my youngest was still a baby. And they would come home at like 10:30 at night from cosmetology school, and they would have a lot they needed to talk through. There was a lot that they were learning, not necessarily good and I was so glad they wanted to talk to us about that. And so we would stay up late with them, like rehashing their day and kind of explaining our worldview on things and like helping them process that. But then my baby would be up at 5:30 the next morning. And so in those situations, we always had silent reading through the day. That was something that was a non-negotiable really with us. And the older kids could read and the younger kids would nap, and mommy would sometimes nap too. But it was just a rest time because I knew I needed it, or I would not be able to give to the varying ages of the kids that I had. So,
yeah. Oh man, silent reading is like an all-day affair in our house. Yeah. I mean, I cannot get one of my daughters to put a book down. Like it's become a punishment for us. Yeah. We're like, take away the books.
Yes.
And I suppose that's a good problem to have. But I'm like, we've got to still be able to do chores. So, yeah. We have a quiet house a lot because we have
a very good problem to have. And I have told people so many times that worry about the best curriculum or the best, the best education for their kids. Reading, I mean, maybe it doesn't do a lot with math, but it covers spelling, it covers grammar, mm-hmm. It can cover history, it can cover science. It's vast. And so yeah. I felt like if we were reading, we were succeeding for sure.
Oh, that's a quote. If you're reading, you're succeeding. Okay, the last question I have for you, because Shea told me you have to ask my mom.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she said, how do you make your kids want to come back home? And she said that you made traditions around holidays that were so fun that your kids, like all of them, want to come back.
Well, I did. My mom was good at that too. She was so good she's been so good as a grandma to always, try to do fun things with the kids. But, it started out more, to be quite honest, and Shea doesn't even know this, it started out more as survival. Like the few things that I did tradition wise, it kept them busy. It gave them things to do and they were still learning, and it made things fun. But then they just loved them so much that then we would just keep doing them. And to be honest, my mom still gets all of my kids a Christmas storybook every year for Christmas. And I mean, Shea is 31 and she still gets one. So, and they look forward to it. It's not like they because they know they'll be able to use it for their children. And so, I can't say I've done it great, but I have tried to incorporate. You can get too many traditions where you just feel like you're running ragged trying to do all of these fun things. But you do have touch points of things that like, this is unique to our family. This is what our family loves to do. And as they got older, they would see that, mom put a lot of time and effort into that. They didn't see that at the time, but as they get older, they realize it. And then that makes them, they do appreciate it. And that's one thing I always want to be sure and tell young moms that I heard Vodi Bakum say so many years ago that there was a lady at the grocery store and she had her little chicks following along behind her. And she was getting all kinds of faces from people and little remarks like, do you know how that happens? And, why do you have so many kids? And he said, I told that lady, you wait 20 to 30 years till your kids are around your table and they rise up and call you blessed. And you wait until that day, because when they're little, they don't understand. And I will say my kids do that. They're great to thank me for things, but it's not even just that. It's not just the verbal, but it's them wanting to come home. It's them hearing them laugh with their siblings when they're home. Like that's what fills my heart. That's what, like, they don't have to tell me thank you. That tells me thank you. And so it's just kind of perpetuating that and having a vision of how it can be and trying to help yourself get there, I guess.
Yeah.
So
that's good. That's a great place to wrap up. I hope that that's the experience I have. I hope my kids, when they're grown, they come back. I mean, that's what I've always wanted, is a home for my kids to come back to, that they're, just have good memories at,
Yes. And it's hard. I feel like we have been so intentional with our kids over the years. And I know people have thought, wow, they're never going to let them go. Like they're going to be so in their face when they have their own families, because we were very intentional to raise them. But once they are gone and on their own, we have just kind of, you're done now. We did our part. And of course, we're here if they need anything. But it's not our job to be in all of their decision makings now. They have their own families. But to see them want to come back home, that is so encouraging, But I do feel it's because we don't force it. We don't, it's like, we want you here. We love it when you're here. But I'm not going to manipulate you. I'm not going to guilt trip you. If you can come, please do. And if you can't, we'll try another time. So it's a joyful journey for sure.
That's good. Oh, this has been good talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. I just hope that all of you found this as an uplifting conversation that you can learn something from. I mean, you have so much experience, Joley, and I don't know. I just need that wisdom poured into me every once in a while.
Well, I feel like it's wisdom born of pain a lot of times, wisdom that I learned from so many mistakes. But my kids have been gracious over the years to forget the mistakes. And God has been gracious to push us on forward even in the midst of the mistakes. So thank you for having me. I hope that something I said is helpful to somebody, but
I'm sure it will be.
I just want people to know motherhood is the greatest, and then grandbabies are even better. So, so thank you, Rita.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. If you want to find me outside the podcast, you can go to RitaRogersCo.com, Rita Rogers Co on Instagram, or Boom Clap Podcast on Instagram. Thanks for listening.